Hello, Temple Beth Abraham. Hag Sameach. Happy Passover to everybody. I bet you're all very excited about the fact that spring is here. I know it's been a very, very long winter. I'm in California, but I do travel a lot, so I got my fair share of winter. But it's Passover, it's spring, and this is one of my absolute favorite holidays. It's like the Jewish Thanksgiving. A lot of praying, a lot of singing, and most importantly, a lot of eating. Today we're going to be making my version of two of the absolute Passover classics, brisket and matzo ball soup. Now, I know around the holidays, time is very valuable. You got relatives coming in, you got a million meals to plan. The last thing you need to worry about is making the brisket and the soup. I know my mom does it about a month and a half in advance. In fact, I believe last Passover, my mom made the Passover brisket the day after the previous Passover, so I wouldn't even tell which one we were having. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually try to do two things at once. We're gonna make the brisket and the matzo ball soup at the same time. I'm gonna take a little bit of a sort of barbecue-y spin on the brisket, but still keeping it cool for Passover. And I'm doing my mom's matzo balls, which are the absolute best on the planet, with my grandma's soup. And I've made one little teeny modification to the matzo balls to just add a little bit of color, which I know is gonna tick off my mom, but I couldn't help it. All right, so let's start with the rub for the brisket. All right, so we're going to start off by bringing the rub together. I'm just going to kind of get in there with my hands. See, the smoked paprika gives it a great smoked flavor already. We're gonna, typically I would smoke a brisket for 14, 15 hours, and my mother would braise it in the oven with ketchup and French onion soup. So we're gonna meet somewhere halfway in between and make an awesome new version of Passover brisket. The next step is pretty much barbecue 101. If you've ever rubbed a chicken or some ribs or anything like that, we're pretty much just gonna take, about a quarter to a half a cup of rub, and we just want to give a nice even coating all over. You don't want to gunk it up too much, otherwise the sugar that's in the rub will start to burn. And that's also why I want you to let it sit for at least a couple hours, ideally overnight. After 24 hours, start to look like this. Now you can see how the rub has sort of become one with the brisket, and that will help, obviously, the flavor sink into the flesh of the brisket. It'll also be nice when we try to sear it right now. We want to put a nice crust on the brisket before we braise it. So this is going to go right into the pan first to give me a nice, good crust. And just going to pop it right down in there. The great thing about the cast iron pan is that it's going to allow us to get a really nice dark golden brown without getting black or burnt. The cast iron is just a really nice, even cooker. And I have it about a medium-high heat. I'm going to let this go for about 3.5, 4 minutes. While that's starting, I'm already going to start the soup. Ideally, you want a perfectly golden broth. I mean, that is the hallmark of a great Jewish chicken soup. Really crystal clear yellow broth. So we just dropped the chicken in the pot. Keep an eye on this. We're going to bring it up to a simmer, and then we're going to let it simmer for an hour. But you want to constantly skim off any of that foam or fat that starts to appear on top of the broth. So we're searing the brisket on one side. Let's see how this looks. Look at that. Getting some great color there. That's beautiful. That color will translate directly into amazing flavor. So we also have a little bit of a braising liquid that we're going to use to braise the brisket, and that's what we're going to get started on next. Okay, this is where my brisket meets Passover brisket. We're using a little bit of liquid smoke. It is kosher. It's just a smoked liquid, and it's a great way to get that natural smoke flavor into a food. You can use this in a barbecue sauce or baked beans often. I'm going to use that in the braising liquid, so it's going to have almost a smoky, almost barbecue flavor. You don't need to use this. The recipe will come out great if you're a little weird about using liquid smoke, but typically I do my own smoking, but here I think it's okay. And the other secret ingredient, one that I remember growing up at every Seder and still Grandpa's preferred beverage of choice, Manischewitz Concord grape. Again, remember I said we're kind of playing on a barbecue / Passover theme. So this would be that sweetness that you might typically get from ketchup or a lot of brown sugar. This is going to cook together with the beef and the tomato and the smoke and the brisket, and it's going to make an incredible sauce. All right, so in the pot, my beef broth, tomato sauce, 2 tablespoons of the liquid smoke, the Manischewitz wine. Smell that. Doesn't that just smell like Seder? I can practically hear Grandpa reading the Haggadah, telling me some great stories. The same stories I heard the previous year, but it doesn't matter. I look forward to the same stories that Grandpa tells every year. So now to our braising liquid, which we got coming together on the pot. We're going to add some nice aromatic flavor enhancers. All right, now I've been very patient, and look at that. Patience pays off. So I let that go for a good 4 minutes. It's a nice, beautiful dark brown, and a good crust is formed. And you see that big surface right there, that third side? I'm going to give that a little flip and give that a little sear as well. So this is looking really, really gorgeous. I'm very, very happy with this. Oh, you just want to cut into that already, don't you? So I have some mirepoix, some carrots, some onions, and celery. I just cut them pretty coarsely, and I'm going to go right into the pan that had the brisket and just sort of cook it in that oil. Just add a little bit of water here. Now, the water is just going to pick up any of those bits that I don't want to burn. And we'll let that go for a few minutes. In the meantime, I see our braising liquid is starting to come to a simmer. That's great because it's going to start to release all the flavor in the cinnamon and the peppercorns, and the cloves, and the chipotles. So it's all going to be nice and hot when we add it to the pan. Now, speaking of the pan, let's ready the pan. Mother likes to keep the kitchen clean. So sometimes it's good to use a little aluminum foil. Now what we do here, actually created this contraption out of heavy-duty aluminum foil. This is my high-tech braising pan. So now these vegetables are looking really nice. And they're gonna pour it right in here. Right to my pan. And you can see from the liquid, aside from smelling really good, this pan is pretty much completely clean. And we're gonna take that brisket, and I'm gonna go fat side down because I really want to render that fat and make it nice and soft. So I'm gonna go fat side down. This might not be exactly how Grandma makes the brisket, but it's just sort of the natural evolution of things. Some fresh thyme sprigs. Now we are ready to go in the oven. We have our liquid. As you can see, we have the chipotle peppers have started to soften. You can smell that smoky, Manischewitz, winey, beefy sort of flavor. You just want to pretty much cover the brisket about halfway. I have a little bit extra, which I'll come back to when this is all done. I'll marry them together and make one sauce. But in the meantime, this is ready to get in the oven. I have a 300-degree oven going, and we're going to cook this for about 3 hours and then check it back. So look at that. You've been working for about 15 minutes, and you already don't have to worry about the brisket for 3 hours. But what do you have to occupy your time? Oh, look! We have a perfect simmer going on. And look at this. This is what I was telling you about. See all this foam? We don't want to let that sit in our soup because we want a really clear yellow broth. So the chicken's been simmering for about an hour, and I'm actually going to pull it out of the pot. Be very careful. Okay. Now at this point, I'm going to let the chicken cool down, and in a few minutes, I'm going to pull all the meat off it and return the bones to the pot. The bones are what are really going to give the broth its full flavor. So now the veggies go in. I have 2 medium leeks. You see, the thing with the leeks is they kind of grow in the ground, like a lot of vegetables do. And all these layers tend to get a lot of dirt in them, and it can get kind of gritty. So make sure you wash them very good. I got a parsnip here, all going in the pot. Now, probably the most special thing in all of Passover to me is the matzo ball soup. There is no better synergistic relationship than that of my grandmother's broth and my mom's matzo balls. I mean, among Jewish women, it is often discussed the quality of one's matzo ball is directly correlated to your quality as a mother. Is this person's matzo balls too lumpy? Hers are too heavy. These are too fluffy. Sandy Gertler's matzo balls are perfect, and no one denies this. And the secret is the club soda. Now, I know a lot of people know about the club soda. What does it do? Why does the club soda make a difference? Is it an old wives' tale? And I'll tell you, if you think about a classic dumpling that's not made with matzo meal, it's usually made with baking soda or baking powder, something that would cause carbon dioxide bubbles to form. So by using the club soda, you're getting around any sort of leavening agent, no baking soda, no baking powder, because it's Passover and we don't let things leaven, and using the club soda. So it's kind of genius. And now we're going to bring this together. Really easy. So we got 4 eggs. Start whisking them. I don't know what it is about my mom's matzo balls, but the consistency is perfect. Not too fluffy, not too dense. You want the matzo ball to have a little bit of resistance. It is, after all, the world's greatest dumpling. To the mixture, we're going to add 1/3 cup of melted shortening. The traditional ingredient would be schmaltz. If you can get some schmaltz, you want to be old school, that's the way to go. This is actually vegetable shortening. So what we're going to add to the matzo balls is a few tablespoons of fresh chopped dill, fresh chives, and parsley. Just going to get a nice, beautiful color and a nice herbal fragrance from the herbs. It's kind of dressing up the matzo ball a little bit. It's 2011. Why not? You should have heard my mom on the phone. When I told my mom that I was messing with her matzo balls and adding anything to it, she couldn't believe it. Don't you like my matzo balls? What's wrong with my matzo balls all of a sudden? For 30 years, you like my matzo balls. Now they're not good enough. I just wanted to try a little bit something different, Mom. I'm gonna chill out this batter for a little bit. I'm gonna pull the meat off the chicken, return the bones, and let that go for another hour. Keeping your hands wet while you make the matzo balls. This is a delicate balance. You want to keep your hands just wet enough that you can form a matzo ball about the size of a golf ball, just like that. But you don't want to get them so wet that the matzo ball starts to break up. And that's pretty much what Mom says, about golf ball size. Mom doesn't play much golf, but that's a golf ball size. And we just kind of drop them into the pot. Then we want to cook these for about 25 minutes from the time that the last matzo ball hits the pot. Remember, a good matzo ball always floats to the top. So after 3 hours, the brisket should be almost done, but not completely done. I don't want it to be falling apart. I'm gonna let it cool just for about 10 minutes until I can slice it. I wanna get nice, clean slices, and then I'm gonna return it to the oven with all the gravy, and that's when it's gonna get super tender. Now look at how much reduction has happened. And that's what we got. Beautiful piece of brisket. Now I like to flip it over, see which way the grain's going, and then that way I can see, I can get nice slices. And if we did our job, it should be nice and tender. So we can see that's just perfect. Okay, so they're pulling apart. Wow, it's really good. The brisket is all nice and sliced, ready to return to the oven. It's about 95% done at this point. This is the braising liquid. I poured into a narrow vessel so it'll be easier for me to degrease it. And I'm just gonna take a little bit of that liquid off. Any fat I can just easily collect on top. And what we're going to do is we're going to finish this off, and this is going to become the gravy. Sandy Gertler would approve of this matzo ball were it not for the fact that I put a bunch of weird herbs in it, but there you go. So these are great now. So if you're having your Seder tomorrow, you can just conserve these, cover them up, and let them sit to the next day. Beautiful. So these look great. Now, about an hour or so before I'm ready to serve the soup, I'm going to add these back to the pot of soup, or you could just cover them, let them rest overnight. Now we're going to bring everything home. So we have our sliced brisket, and we have our sauce that we added the potato starch to, the fresh thyme, and then we're just going to basically cover the brisket. Return this to a hot oven. I got the oven going at 425, so there might be some reduction. This is just gonna finish the brisket, give it that final reduction to tenderness, but we've already sliced it, so the slices are gonna keep really nicely. So now all of the components of our soup can be assembled the day before, and I think right before the Seder, you wanna bring everything together in the pot, and as soon as you make that first break, as soon as it's mealtime, this soup is going to be done. So we have our matzo balls. We're going to just get those in the pot. Pour the broth on top. About 8 ounces each of onions, carrots, and celery that we're going to return to the pot. And this is one of Grandma's secrets. I told you Grandma makes the best soup in the world, and this is what she claims. It's the dill. And she just kind of throws it in there willy-nilly like that. So that's what we're going to do. Now, this is why we pulled the chicken out and reserved it, because now it's perfectly cooked. It's not going to be really stringy and dry, and it's going to still have lots of flavor in the soup. My favorite part of the Seder. Grandma's soup with Mom's matzo balls, a little herby twist. And look at that matzo ball. That is a hearty dumpling. I love it. And it's got that great flavor. Nice and fluffy, but still firm. So let's check on the brisket. Oh, yes. And you can see, just a test, the slice holds together nicely, but pulls apart when slightly provoked. That's the sign of a perfectly cooked brisket. And we take some of the remaining gravy that we had that we kind of just kept thickening up. There. And this is my favorite part, how I like to eat this. I like to take some of the harosis, which is also one of my favorite parts of the Seder, some of the apples with the walnuts, and this is some fresh grated horseradish on top. So it's almost like a play on roast beef with horseradish, Jewish style. And you get the apples and the wine and the walnuts and the honey with the horseradish. Temple Beth Abraham, Hag Sameach. Have a great holiday. Be with your family. Enjoy. Have my brisket. Have your brisket. Have your grandma's brisket. Whatever you do, have fun.